So today I want to talk about editing. And honestly, I have a pretty complicated relationship with editing. I don't really enjoy it, and I never have, but I've started to really enjoy the end result of it. And so I want to talk a little bit about where I started, where I am now, and kind of the tools that helped me along the way. But I also want to show like a real-time example of how I edit, especially photos from the Lumix GX85, because I do think that this camera in particular makes me want to edit the photos. Like the files are really flexible and it just feels like, I don't know, this camera can wear many masks in terms of like, you can have a super sharp, super clean image, but you can also make it a little bit nostalgic, a little bit filmy, if you will. And so I think maybe the best place for me to start is that I used to just change the sliders. I used to just move them up and down in Lightroom and then look at the photo over and over and over again. So editing would take me hours and hours, and I think that's a big reason that I didn't enjoy it to begin with. Something that dramatically changed that for me was when Adobe released I guess like the profiles and the presets. So for the presets, it was the first time that Lightroom kind of felt like Instagram, like early Instagram, where you would take a photo, put it in Instagram, and you could click all the filters and see your photo kind of like come to life in these different ways and get an idea of which one fit the mood that you were going after. And while those were helpful in terms of me editing faster and having an idea of what style I wanted to go after, I still don't think it helped me as a photographer envision the final image when I was taking it. I think film made that change for me or really helped me along that journey. And I think I've taken a lot of my learnings from shooting film and kind of moved them into the digital realm with editing. And what I mean by that specifically is that when you choose a film stock, typically it has unique characteristics, whether it means that the reds and yellows will be saturated, or it's a low contrast, kind of faded look, or high grain, low grain, lots of different things like that. And so whenever I take a photo now, I have an idea of what I want it to look like or what type of characteristics would match this specific scene the best. And so using that kind of mindset and then seeing lots of different photographers that I enjoy have presets or edits on YouTube, I was kind of able to meld those two worlds together and come away with something that's really exciting. And so I think maybe the best place for us to start is to show you some of my photos from Seattle, show you how I edit them, which is how I edit most of my photos, and then kind of use that as a jumping off point to like which tools I use and my export settings and things like that. So let me go ahead and jump into Lightroom and I will show you. Alrighty, so let's take a step back here. So in Lightroom, I pulled some of my favorite photos from Seattle. In the beginning, I'll probably show a bunch of them that more than just these 27 or so, but I feel like these 27 give a pretty good idea of maybe one of the biggest challenges whenever I start editing photos. So I have photos from lots of different scenes, and my goal here is really to pick one that I feel like is a good starting point for most of them. And so let's just go ahead and choose maybe one with people. So you can see we have some with people. We have some like cityscapes, landscapes. We have a food photo. We have some indoor, some outdoor, some nature. So yeah, there's a good bit of variety here. Let's go ahead and choose this one. And so in real time, what my editing looks like is I open up my presets with the Command P. I have a folder for my most used presets, and I will kind of pop through them and see which one fits the bill. Or I'll already have an idea when I take the photo of what I think might be best. And so one thing I want to mention before I show you the one that I'm going to choose is that I've bought presets from Adrian. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but maybe saying Guinetti. Dylan Spitz, I think is his name. I don't know this guy's name, but his YouTube channel is FUTC. And then Julia Trotti, Mitch Lally, and yeah, they've all been fantastic. I would say if you're looking to buy presets from a photographer or a set of photographers, maybe start small and maybe try to buy presets from somebody who has kind of like let me change this to the list view, like a stackable set. That way you can kind of get an idea of all the different things that can affect your image, especially if you're a little bit unfamiliar with editing, I think this is a great way to be able to kind of reverse engineer your own presets or your own ideas. But yeah, I think pretty much from each of them, I've found at least one preset that feels like it can be a go-to. And so that's kind of what you can see here, where I have one from Adrian, these two I made myself, one from Mitch, one from Dylan. Uh, this is also from Dylan, and then one from Julia. So yeah, let's pretty much what would happen in real time is I would choose this and think maybe that's a little bit too bright and pull it back just a touch. But I think this is also cheating a little bit because I can show you. Let's pull up the versions. I know this is the one I chose because I liked it the most. So I'm really just honestly kind of trying to go back to where I was. But I think that's the cool thing about editing too, is that every time you edit, you can kind of try a different look or a different flair. And so I'm going to try not to refer back to how I originally edited too much. I want to maybe try to do something not from scratch, but see if I would end up at the same result. So yeah, I think maybe before I make some minor adjustments, I can talk about the big picture process for me. So yeah, basically I would try to choose a photo, see if it made sense to slap a preset on it if I already had one in mind. If I do and I kind of like how it looks, then I would go ahead and copy those settings and I would go ahead and paste them to everything else. Because one of my big goals with editing is for everything to look consistent and intentional. Especially when I'm coming from a trip or maybe a specific like photo shoot of a portrait session or something like that. Like I love for the photos to look like they were all taken either by the same camera or at the same time, the same light, whatever. Of course, there will be small differences. Typically, what happens whenever I go on a trip is I end up using one or two presets. It can either be like a daytime and a nighttime, or it could be like a color and a black and white. But let's see kind of how this looks. So just from first glance, it looks like that preset works pretty well for everything, which is typically my goal. But I do know that for this image in particular, I ended up making it black and white because I liked how it looked in black and white, but it does look pretty decent here. I can tell it's not quite straight, so I would hit the auto on the crop tool. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. If anything, I would maybe, you can see some of this blue back here is pretty faded. And so I would maybe play with some of these to see if I could bring back that blue. It doesn't look like, it changed the color up here a bit, but not so much at the bottom. Yeah. So then maybe if that is, I could do the point color. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's not really, it is blue, but it's almost more of like a, yeah, like a gray. That makes sense why we're having troubles with that. I actually do like a little bit more of saturation here. It just kind of makes the blue pop more, but I don't know if I would actually do that. I think that's maybe part of the reason I ended up going black and white for this photo, because it felt like I typically, with architecture, I do like having a little bit more contrast with the black and white. And so yeah, I definitely see why I ended up with that. So let's go ahead and slap that on there and see if we like that more. I think I do, but let's maybe bring some contrast in here. Oops. Yeah, I like the contrast. I think we could also potentially bring back up the texture and the clarity to make it even a little bit more. And I don't think some green would hurt to give it some texture. Yeah. Yeah, so that's like a little bit juicier, a little bit more contrasty than I think I even edited it the first time. So before, after. Yeah, I think it just kind of gets rid of some of the distractions with the color here. I don't feel like color actually adds much to this image. So yeah, that's a good example of where maybe I would break out black and white. Okay, cool. So that's one of the ones that we would change. Let's look at this one really quickly. I actually didn't end up loving this image. You can see in this corner, we have like a crazy hot spot over here. And I'm not really sure how we got there, but it's fine. We will adjust. So I think maybe the first thing I did was probably switch you to like a 16:9. Yeah, that feels right. So we still have a little bit of it. Let's see. What if we do the old 2:1 and maybe put you like here? Okay. And then what if we bring down the exposure some? That looks decent to me. And this actually might, let's make it a little bit brighter. This might be a good time for me to show one of the tools that I definitely use sparingly, but whenever I do use it, I quite enjoy it. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and hit M for mask, and I'm going to do a linear gradient. Let's see. Yeah, something like that, and then maybe move it over a little bit, like here. Okay, and then let's see if we can bring down some of that exposure. And let's take a look. It's still pretty toasty over there, but it doesn't look insane like it once did. Yeah, so I think I would be somewhat happy with that. I would probably still play with it a little bit more because that corner is kind of crazy to me. But I don't know. I think it also has like a little bit of like it feels very much like an alive photo. Yeah, I turned down the shutter speed quite a bit to get some of that water motion blur. So I don't know. I would maybe mess with it more, but I also do kind of like that it feels not perfect. Like it feels a little rough. But okay. This one, I do like kind of how it is. These highlights are for sure too bright, but I don't know if I mind. Yeah, I would maybe pull them down just a little bit, but that might be the only adjustment that I make here. So yeah, hopefully this is kind of showing that my goal is to be pretty quick and move through photos with momentum. That way I can kind of get through the whole set. And I would say my most common adjustment is making things level and maybe messing with the exposure a little bit. But for the most part, I look for things that feel or look wrong versus trying to. Yeah, I think maybe that's a good way to put it. I think when I first started editing photos, I was trying to build a style from scratch, which I think is a good thing to try to accomplish. But now that I use the presets, I'm not trying to build a style. I'm trying to make sure that the style doesn't break anything. So maybe the highlights are too strong, or the skin tones look a little funky to me, or the red is too saturated, or this specific situation calls for more grain or whatever. And so I think I'm looking at it from like a specific adjustment versus just staring at this entire option or these list of options and changing the slider up and down until something feels right. So hopefully this is helpful. Just kind of scrolling through these photos to see if they feel right, and for the most part they do. This one I think is maybe a good example too of where I would probably switch out the preset. So I have this daytime architecture that I like to use for just like extra crispy shots. So it's good for daytime architecture as the name suggests, but it's also good for food. And so I would probably switch this one out for daytime architecture and then come back, bring up the exposure a little bit. Yeah. And I think this is what I mentioned too earlier about like the Lumix GX85 being really versatile. Like this feels, it doesn't feel like commercial photography, but it feels like way closer to commercial photography than like nostalgic personal documentation. And I think that this camera can do both, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I actually quite like how this looks. So we will keep it. Sometimes when I bring this one out, some of the colors are a little crazy, and so I have to mess with those. But this feels pretty good. Also, bumping up the texture, the clarity, and the dehaze does quite a bit for this one as well. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll say before I pop out of Lightroom. Oh, actually, I want to show you the export settings, but I do often use the enable lens correction in my presets, just that way I have it built in. Sometimes I toggle it on and off if I want a messier photo, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, but most of the times I do leave it on and it is pretty good, pretty helpful. And the other thing that I'll mention is that I do start all of my edits in the Adobe Color profile. I've tried some of the other ones out. I don't think they're bad or anything like that. I think it's just what I'm most used to is the Adobe Color. And so it kind of makes my starting point really consistent for all of my photos. So, but I do think with some of these adaptive preset or adaptive colors that they've come out with, might be something worth trying in the future. Before I share the export settings, some other tools that I use. So I mentioned the mask tool. I think the subject detection is really good in the mask tool. I use the heal tool quite a bit, especially for some of my professional work. And so maybe I can give you an example. I don't know if this is a good photo. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good example. Well, maybe this one. So like, let's say we wanted to potentially try to get rid of this exit sign. Just pop that around there. Did I get the middle? There we go. And then remove it. Let's see if it does a good job or not. Usually it does, and I do like that it gives you, yeah. So yeah, that's really good. I use that sometimes for more professional work. For personal stuff, like for this photo, I would leave it in there. An exit sign doesn't bother me, but in situations where I'm trying to deliver work for a client, they want it to be extra clean, I might pop in there and use that. The only other tool that I will mention using is the, and maybe I can use it for this photo too. I use the enhance. They recently added it to this panel, so you can add the denoise without having to. I used to do like a command, I think it was Command Shift E or something like that. But let's see. It used to create like a DNG file for it, but it looks like now you can do it in here. And okay. Yeah, so this is my first time using it in this specific window, so we'll see how it does. Okay. I think it did okay. Honestly, it's usually a more dramatic change, so I'm not sure if maybe because I'm in this window, I would need to bump that up a little bit more. Let's see. But it did look pretty natural, and I think sometimes that tool can look unnatural, so maybe it's a good thing that it's looking a little bit more subtle. Yeah, I think that's actually pretty okay. And what was this shot at? ISO 1250. So honestly, not that high. There's probably a better photo that would be a better example. But yeah, those are the tools that I use the most. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about or show you was my export settings. So pretty simple, JPEG, full size, 100%. I do all the metadata because it makes it so much easier to find the photo or find like what camera it was taken with and the shutter speed and all those other settings and Apple Photos and Google Photos. And then I typically give them a name, like Seattle, and then sometimes I'll put the camera too, just in case. And I don't do any output sharpening, and I do the sRGB color space for all of them. So, and then that's it. That is that's the full edit workflow for, yeah, for my photos. The last thing that I guess I will say is that I still don't really like editing photos. Like I like the end result as I mentioned, but the process isn't something I find super enjoyable, and so I still do enjoy shooting film a lot, and I enjoy shooting with my Fujifilm camera with the recipes. I do feel like editing is an important skill to have as a photographer, especially if it's something that you want to do professionally. So I'm glad that I've picked it up and that I hopefully continue to get better at it. But yeah, if you have any tips or questions, let me know in the comments. And hopefully this was helpful, because I think this is by far the most requested video I've had so far. And I think that's a little bit why it took me a while to make, because I wanted to be kind of thorough and talk through some different stuff. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.